The sun hung low over the Texas plains and cast long shadows across the dusty rangeland, where Samuel Garrett had spent most of his 48 years building something from nothing, and his ranch stretched out before him like a patchwork quilt of golden grass and weathered fence posts. He knelt by the creek bed checking the water level and thinking about the drought that had been testing every rancher in the county when he heard it, and a sound that didn't belong in this quiet corner of his land and the unmistakable cry of someone in distress. Samuel stood slowly and his knees protesting the movement as they often did these days, and he followed the sound past the old cottonwood tree. And there she was. And a young woman, maybe, 25 or so, leaning against the gnarled trunk and her face pale as moonlight. Her clothing was torn and stained with what he immediately recognized as blood, and not just a little of it, and her jeans hung awkwardly around her ankles and her shirt was riddled with holes and dark patches, ma'am. He called out gently and not wanting to startle her, and, "Are you all right?" She looked up at him with eyes that held both fear and relief, and, "I need help," she managed, and her voice shaking, and, "Please." Samuel approached carefully, and his hands visible and open and showing he meant no harm, and, "I'm Samuel Garrett," he said, "and this is my land and I'm going to help you." As he got closer, he could see the wounds more clearly, and they looked bad and angry and red and scattered across her legs and arms and even one on her cheek. "We need to get you to a doctor," he said, and already calculating the 20-minute drive to town. "Wait," she said, and her hand moving to her waistband, and, "Let me take it off first." Samuel froze, and his mind struggling to understand what she meant and what she could possibly need to remove before getting medical attention. She saw his confusion, and despite her obvious pain, she almost smiled and, "My gun. Belt," she explained, "and it's hidden under my shirt and I don't want to scare anyone in town and they might think I'm dangerous." And that's when Samuel noticed the professional quality of her boots, and despite the mud and the way she carried herself, "Even injured and with a certain trained awareness, you're law enforcement," he said, and not a question but a statement. She nodded weakly and, "Deputy Marshal Emma Catherine Rodriguez," she said. "And I was tracking a group of cattle thieves when things went sideways and they had dogs and mean ones." Samuel felt his heart clench, and he'd lost cattle to thieves twice in the past 3 years, and good honest animals that represented months of work and investment. "The dogs did this," he said. And looking at her wounds with new understanding, "I had to run through barbed wire to get away," Emma said, "and the dogs got a few bites in too before I made it to the fence, and I've been walking for hours trying to find help." "Let's get that belt off then," Samuel said, and then we're getting you to Doc Morrison." Emma fumbled with the buckle and her hands shaking from shock and blood loss, and Samuel stepped in to help, and his weathered fingers working the clasp with the patience that came from years of handling frightened animals and delicate machinery. The gun belt came free and he laid it carefully aside, and, "Can you walk?" he asked. "I think so," she said, but when she tried to stand, her legs buckled. Without hesitation, Samuel scooped her up, and she was lighter than he expected, and all bone and sinew and determination, and, "My horse is just over that rise," he said, as he carried her toward where his gelding stood patiently waiting, and Emma spoke quietly, "And thank you," she said, and, "Not everyone would stop to help a stranger these days." "My mama raised me right," Samuel said simply, and besides, and any enemy of cattle thieves is a friend of mine." The ride to town was careful and slow, and Emma cradled in front of Samuel, on the saddle and his arms forming a protective circle around her to keep her from falling. She drifted in and out of consciousness and muttering about the men she'd been tracking and their route and their likely hideouts. "Save your strength," Samuel told her, "and you can make your report after Doc fixes you up." At the clinic, Doc Morrison took one look at Emma and ushered them straight into the examination room, and "Samuel Garrett," he said, and, "You have a talent for finding trouble." "Trouble. Found me this time," Samuel replied, "and she's a deputy marshal." Doc's eyebrows rose, but he got to work and cleaning and stitching and bandaging while Samuel waited outside and pacing the narrow hallway like an expectant father. 2 hours later, Doc emerged and, "She's going to be fine," he said, and needed 47 stitches total and some antibiotics for potential infection, but she's tough as nails, that one. "Can I see her?" Samuel asked. "She's asking for you," Doc said with a curious look and says she needs to thank her rescuer properly. Emma was propped up in the recovery bed, and her leg wrapped in clean white bandages and her face freshly washed, revealing a scattering of freckles across her nose. "They tell me I owe you my life," she said. "You don't owe me anything," Samuel replied. "And just doing what's right." "There's not as much of that going around as there used to be," Emma said, and her eyes meeting his. "And doing what's right, I mean." Samuel pulled up a chair and, "Tell me about these cattle thieves." And so she did. And the whole story spilling out and how the gang had been operating across 3 counties, and how she'd been tracking them solo because the marshal service was stretched thin, and how she'd gotten close and too close, and before they spotted her I should have called for backup, she admitted. "And pride got in the way." "Pride keeps us going sometimes," Samuel said, "and nothing wrong with that as long as you learn from it." Doc Morrison insisted. Emma stay for observation and at least overnight and maybe 2, and since she had nowhere else to go and no family nearby and Samuel found himself offering his guest room, "I couldn't impose," Emma protested. "You'd be doing me a favor." Samuel said, "And house has been too quiet since my wife passed 3 years ago and my daughter moved to Dallas and could use the company." Something in his voice must have convinced her because she agreed. The next morning, Samuel helped Emma into his truck, and the bandages fresh and the pain medication making her drowsy, and they drove the winding road back to his ranch in comfortable silence. The house was modest, but well kept, and a 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch and a swing that creaked in the breeze. "It's beautiful," Emma said. "It's home," Samuel replied simply. Over the following days, a routine developed, and Samuel would check on the cattle and mend fences and tend to the endless tasks that kept a ranch running, and Emma would rest, and reading books from his shelf and occasionally helping with small tasks despite his protests. "I'm not used to sitting still," she explained as she folded laundry one-handed and her wounded arm still tender. "I can see that," Samuel said with a smile, "but healing takes time and you've got to give your body that time." In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and they'd talk and really talk, and in the way people do when they've been through something together. Emma told him about growing up in El Paso, and about her father who'd been a police officer, and how she'd wanted to follow in his footsteps, and about the loneliness that came with her job. Samuel shared memories of his late wife Margaret and how they'd built the ranch together from abandoned land, and how she'd been the one who insisted on planting the cottonwood trees that now provided shade, and how he still missed her every single day. "She sounds wonderful," Emma said softly. "She was," Samuel agreed, "and she would have liked you, and probably would have had us married off within a week of meeting you." They both laughed at that, and the sound carrying across the empty plains. 2 weeks passed, and then 3, and Emma's wounds healed and turning from angry red to pink to white scars that would fade with time. The marshal service called and wanting her back, but Emma found herself hesitating. "There's something about this place," she told Samuel one morning as they watched the sunrise together, "and it's peaceful in a way I've never experienced." "That's the land," Samuel said, "and it has a way of holding on to you if you let it." "Is that what happened to you?" Emma asked. "No," Samuel said thoughtfully, "and I held on to it, and there's a difference." The day Emma was scheduled to leave and her bags packed and the truck loaded, and she stood on the porch with Samuel, and neither quite ready to say goodbye. "I could come back," she offered, "and on weekends maybe, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd like that," Samuel said, and his voice gruff with emotion, "and I'd like that very much." But instead of leaving, Emma set down her bags and turned to face him fully. "And Samuel," she said, "and what if I didn't go at all?" He looked at her in surprise, and "Your job," he began. "I could transfer to the local field office," she said, "and they've been trying to recruit me for months, and I could help track those cattle thieves from here, and legally, I mean, and with jurisdiction." "Are you sure?" Samuel asked, "and you'd be giving up a lot." "I'd be gaining more," Emma said firmly, "and these past weeks, and I've felt more at home than I have in years, and is that crazy?" No, Samuel said, and stepping closer, and it's not crazy at all. They stood there in the morning light, and two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way, and Samuel reached out and took her hand. Margaret would have approved, he said softly. Wish I could have met her, Emma replied. In a way you have, Samuel said, and she's in every board of this house and every tree on this land, and she'd want me to be happy, and I think you make me happy, Emma Z.